where everyone is from or who
Yeah, of
they work
course.
for?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Paul, do you want to start?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mike.
Hi, Paul.
Paul Conroy from Nets Group. We are a group of companies. We've got a couple of training providers and endpoint assessment organisation. One of our training providers specialises in energy, and the other one in digital apprenticeships.
Very good, thank you.
Dean, do you mind going next?
Sorry, did you say me?
Yeah, would you mind just introducing yourself? That'd
Yeah,
be great.
no problem.
Thank you.
Christine Edwards. I'm an independent consultant. Most of my specialism is around independent training providers, and my biggest sort of area really is maths and English.
Lovely,
Very good.
thank you. Julie, do you mind going next?
Yeah, I'm from a independent company called Create the Space, and we are involved with the day-to-day sort of running of the apprenticeship. So for me, it's the delivery of the face-to-face, and it's also the getting people ready for endpoint assessment, collating assignments and that sort of thing. So that's what I mainly do.
Very good. And has that moved on to webinar or remote delivery
Well,
now?
the additional issue that I've got is that the business that we work with is one that's linked to the Ministry of Defence. So I've just this week got access to a Dropbox to go and pick stuff up from. So we're trying to get WebExes. I'm doing some training next week, and then I'm hoping to get some movement with them next week and the week after to start delivering online. At the minute, everything is on email or telephone call.
Brilliant. We're all going to be absolute world-class WebEx deliverers in the future, I think.
Great, thanks, Julie. Sarah?
I wear a couple of hats. So my business is doing events for HR directors. And I also do day rate work. So I'm a visiting lecturer at Wolverhampton Uni for their HR models. And I'm also an assessor at Warwickshire Group of colleges as well. And I mentor students, so really passionate about sort of the future of HR as well.
Very good, thanks. That's 4 hats.
But yeah, that's just 4 I've told you about. There are a few.
I was going to say there's many more. You know, that's the Edward de Bono's thinking hats. I think it's Sarah's Potter's and entrepreneurial hats, isn't it?
Yes, I've got about 10 different elevator pictures.
And Hayley, over to you.
Yeah, hi everybody. Hayley Baird, excuse me. So I own my own business, a learning and development business partner. So up until this point, I've kind of supported all areas of L&D, but have been quickly catapulted into my specialism around virtual classrooms and supporting businesses really in designing and delivering their content virtually. So that's where I sit at the moment, and I'm working with some apprenticeship providers actually and supporting them with that shift. And I work very closely with Erica also.
Amazing. That's a great skill to have at the moment.
I know, it's yeah. Yeah, I am. It's fair to say I've been busy over the last 6 weeks, and just getting to a point now where I'm starting to actually look at more of a plan, a bit more strategically, rather than reacting so much, which is where I've been for the last 6 weeks, very much so, supporting businesses. So so it's fair to say we're busy.
Good. And for those of you that saw something black fleeting across the screen, that was the cat. She jumped on the desk and decided to join us.
Welcome to join in if she wants.
I like your slogan behind you, Christine.
Oh, which one? This one?
Yeah, there we go. I think
Can everyone see it?
I think we should all live by that.
What does it say? Do you want to read it out?
Some people want it to happen. Some people wish it would happen. Others make it happen.
Love it.
Very good. I think the make it happen one is what we all need at the moment.
Yeah.
I'll introduce myself and tell you a bit about what I do. How long do we have, Erica?
As long as, I know you said you've got to scoot off before 10:30, haven't you? Because you've got another session. So the session's yours, Mike, and then I'm sure we will have some questions and things towards the end, if that's okay.
I will probably share my screen at a point, just to share some of the slides. I did a presentation recently where I kind of give a bit of background to what I do and why and how. So I'll pop that on in a moment or two if that's okay. But just so you know context, my background is I was 28 years in financial services in Barclays, the last sort of 10 of which were in HR in various different guises. I was head of learning and development in the retail bank for a number of years, and then more laterally head of early careers for probably the last 6-7 years of my career. So I ran all the Barclays apprenticeship programs, built those up kind of from nothing really, because as a bank they didn't really do apprenticeships before the kind of reforms came along. And when I left, we'd a really strong, positive, thriving program. But the kind of one of the things that always kind of was on my mind and something which in particular in the last couple of years of my career there was the real growth that we were starting to see in issues around mental health amongst apprentices. And either that was people coming into the organization already with challenges they were facing, or people struggling to cope with the sort of pressure of work life and study, particularly when you start to look at the higher end of the apprenticeship spectrum. So people studying for a full-time degree whilst also working full-time, putting a lot of pressure on them, and also a high pressure corporate environment anyway. Any bank or any business is challenging, let alone when you're trying to build your career from scratch and also get your qualifications. So we'd started to see, and I think the tipping point for me was probably 3 or 4 years before I left. For the first time ever in Barclays history, we saw absence from work, the higher percentage of people absent from work because of mental health issues than physical health issues. So we'd always traditionally seen most people off for physical health reasons, but that tipped, and it continued to grow throughout my last couple of years in the organization. So it wasn't just apprentices, it was the wider workforce, where we're starting to see more people kind of struggling with stress, anxiety, and then further down the mental health spectrum, if you like, more serious mental health issues. So when I left Barclays, I wanted to try look at how I could have some sort of positive impact on that, particularly with young people, apprentices and graduates. And one of the things I really wanted to do was be a lot more proactive about how we help people manage their mental health. Because what I'd seen was us really being quite reactive. So when somebody was unwell, then we'd have the support services in place, the counselling or the third party organisations, whatever it might be, to really kind of support people. But almost by then it was too late. And a lot of companies were doing mental health first aid training. Again, very positive, but again, for me, felt too late. If your mental health first aid training is really all about spotting signs, encouraging people to have good conversations about how they're feeling. But obviously, if people have already reached that point, quite often it can be too late. So I wanted to look at how we could put in place a more proactive program to help people stay well, become more resilient, understand and manage stress, and thrive in the workplace. And it really all came off the back of some development I had quite early in my career. I had quite a significant challenge with stress when I was in my early career. I took on a really big management role in one of my first management roles in the organization. I was running a whole bunch of branches, loving life, really felt like I was absolutely on top of my game until a point where I thought I was having a heart attack. And I went to the doctor and said, I've got these pains in my chest, I've got pains in my arm, I think I'm having a heart attack. And the doctor said, you're not having a heart attack. He said, you're just really highly stressed. And, if you don't do something about it, you'll burn out and you'll have some real long-term issues. And that was a bit of a shock to my system. And I did a number of things. One of which was try to understand myself and my mind and how I worked, if you like, better. Because I hadn't seen it coming. I'd been absolutely felt like I was on top of my game, loving life, but in reality was taking on way too much and not looking after myself and not taking the breaks I needed to recover and re-energize and do all the things you need to do to stay mentally well as physically well. So I wasn't switching off or taking time to recover. So one of the things that struck me the most, one of the things that had the biggest impact, positive impact post that particular scenario was I went on a course with a guy who talked about the power of positive thinking, positive psychology, and this was very early in the whole evolution of positive psychology. It's a relatively new psychology compared to traditional therapies and traditional what they call medical treatments. And positive psychology, actually share my screen because I've got a slide somewhere. Hopefully you might be able to see this. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Yeah, great. This is the, let me just click through this very quickly. So this is the positive psychology model, and this is what I learned on a course I went on with the bank around sort of the power of your mind and the power of positive thinking. And this is really at the heart of what we do within my business, because my business works with corporates, and we support and develop their apprentices to look at how they can move from where most of us sit mentally, which is absolutely slap bang in the middle of this mental health spectrum, which is languishing, which isn't a bad place to be. Languishing is you're okay. You're not absolutely flourishing and thriving at the top of your game, but you're probably not mentally unwell either. And if you look at all the research that's out there globally, there's global happiness surveys. 75 to 80% of the population sit in the middle. They sit in languishing. And what this guy said and what positive psychology taught is that actually that's really not good enough. We should be encouraging people to flourish and be happier, and we should help them think about how and equip them with tools for how they can actually flourish and be mentally healthy, as opposed to just okay. And if you look at the countries at the top of the league table, the UK is about 16th on the Global Happiness Index. But if you look at the countries that are at the very top of the tree, it's most of the Scandinavian countries, so Sweden, Finland, and they all have something in common, which is they practice positive psychology and gratitude and thankfulness on a daily basis, on an ongoing basis. So if you go to Sweden, for instance, they do lots of different things, but one of the things they do is they hang on trees messages about what they're grateful for, and it's been shown that by practicing gratitude, practicing positive thinking, you actually can change your own sort of neuro makeup and overcome some of the biases we all have. We're all wired to have a negative bias in our minds, and that's there to protect us. So we are wired to see threats in the environment, and that comes from prehistoric times where threats would have killed us off, and therefore it was a survival instinct. But in the modern day, threats are your Wi-Fi going down, you having to homeschool the kids while you're also having a really important meeting, or whatever it might be. The brain now sees those as threats, and we're wired to see those. We're wired to see kind of negative things that could go wrong, risks to us, and that is there to protect us. But the challenge in the modern day is that's always on. There's always sort of those threats in the environment. So what positive psychology teaches us is you have to overcome that bias. If you're to lead a happier, more positive life, you have to look at ways in which you can rewire your brain to balance it up a lot more, so that you see the positives as well as the negatives. So they say the brain is Teflon for positive and Velcro for negative. That's kind of a very simplistic way of looking at it. So anything negative, so if you have a bit of feedback in a performance review, 9 bits of positive feedback and 1 negative, what you will often dwell upon is the 1 negative, and that's our negative bias. That's the Velcro for negative. So what positive psychology really focuses on is how you can take on a more positive outlook in life, but actually change the neural makeup of your mind to be a more positive and happier person. And that it is something that can be practiced and learned, and you can overcome, if you like, the negative bias that most people will have. So if you look at this spectrum, on the sort of left-hand side, you've got mentally unwell, and this is the traditional therapy-based view of mental health, which is most people sit in the middle, but everybody fluctuates up and down on a daily basis, a weekly basis, monthly basis. We all move up and down. But if you stay in the, if you move down, so if you have a bad day or feeling down or blue, then you move towards the left. And if you stay in that sort of state for too long, then you can become, mentally unwell, where you require treatment. And the traditional view of how we treat people is, you go along to see your GP, and the GP will, make a diagnosis, whether it's, anxiety or depression or bipolar or whatever the different challenges are that you might be facing. They'll diagnose those, and then they'll put you on a course of either drugs or therapy, or a range of treatments that will, and essentially the current model we use predominantly in the UK at the minute, and globally probably for managing mental health, is they again get you back up to the middle. So they get you back up to languishing. So the treatment works, and they get you back to okay. And our kind of view is okay isn't good enough. Why can't people be happier and flourishing in their lives? So that's really what our organisation does. So we look at how we can help people, particularly graduates and apprentices we work with, stay out of the mentally unwell by helping them think about how they can look after themselves. So for instance, the most common way people fall into mental ill health is not managing stress in their lives terribly effectively. Stress can be and should be a really supportive, positive thing for us. It's there to help us, to manage threats in our lives, but also it helps us be more effective. It makes us more alert. It makes our brains sharper, and it should be a very positive thing. But actually, if you are too stressed for too long, then it can have a really negative effect on you, both physically and mentally. So we teach apprentices in particular what are the signs of stress, what are things they should be looking out for, and most importantly, how do you manage stress to make it your friend and make it something that's a real tool for you to use in your life to make you more successful and perform better. So we look at essentially, we spend a lot of time looking at how you move towards the right hand side of this spectrum. So we look at mental health. If you look at the sort of mental health first aid model, it's about spotting people who are on the left hand side and helping them and making sure they get the support they need, etc., etc. We're really not about that. We are all about helping people move, because the majority of people do sit in languishing. They don't sit in mentally unwell. How do you move from just being okay to actually flourishing? Because when you're flourishing, you're performing at a higher level. You're happier in your personal life. You're happier in your professional life, and we kind of think that's a pretty good place to be. So we did a little bit of research just to see. I was very fortunate. The Open University agreed to co-sponsor a piece of research with my company, and we went out and we kind of explored how big an issue is this for employers. And we looked at 700 large and small employers from public and private sector. And we did two bits of research. One was a separate piece looking at attitudes toward hiring people with disabilities, which I can touch on another day. But the main piece I just want to touch on today is what's happening around mental health amongst people in early careers. So we looked at the trends in mental health and disability. What were people seeing? What impacts was that having? And what were employers looking for in terms of support? You probably won't be surprised. Unfortunately, I'm going to try and move. There we go. I can't see the screen properly. you won't be surprised by some of this, I'm sure, because I'm sure you'll have seen this with employers you work with or in your own businesses. But a third of the employers said they'd seen a rise in mental health issues amongst their apprentices in the last 3 years. And when we asked them what they could attribute that to, obviously pressure of work was a big one. A lot of it coming from outside of work. So if you look at the third one down, personal non-work issues. So a lot of mental health issues coming from outside the workplace. So this is maybe challenges at home, financial problems, family issues, etc., etc. Money is a worry, and clearly early in your career, when you're not being paid a particularly high wage, often you may be living in a high cost area. If you're in one of the major cities, money will be a worry, and that does cause mental health issues. And I think the bottom one, which is a positive one, more people being willing to disclose mental health issues. I think people are more open now than they were 4 or 5 years ago about talking about mental health, and that's, I think, on largely on the back of a lot of really high profile campaigns and organizations and employers making a real effort to try and encourage people to open up and be honest. So historically, people would not have said they were off with a mental health issue. They would often said, I've got an upset stomach, or another reason. So what's the impact? Well, pretty significant. 40% said they saw increased sickness or absence, which obviously has a big impact on productivity in the workforce. And a quarter saying they're seeing people leaving, which is a worry. Lower productivity, lower engagement, and an impact on company culture. So we kind of we got this research. We looked at what employers were asking for, and basically they said we want more support in both developing our apprentices, but also developing the people who support our apprentices, so the managers and our providers that are working with the apprentices day to day, both so that they can create the right culture for the apprentice to thrive in, because obviously a lot of stress and pressure comes from the environment in which the individual is operating. So it's all very well equipping people with individuals with the tools to be successful in looking after their mental health and physical health. But if they then go back into an office environment or a team environment where the support isn't there, then it can be really quite counterproductive. So you've taught somebody how to look after themselves, but their boss or their team or whatever is just not right in terms of maintaining their health. So we look at working with organizations about how do we get the culture right, as well as how do we develop the individuals and equip them with the tools they need to really thrive and move towards the right of that sort of mental health spectrum. So the first organization we work with and still work with is MBDA. So they big engineering company, subsidiary of BAE Systems, or partner company, and they have a big program where they have graduates and apprentices. And I spoke at a conference about what we do, and I was approached by a lady called Kathy Strachan, who's head of learning and development there, who said, look, Mike, can you come and talk to us? Because we have some real significant issues with well-being amongst our graduates and apprentices. We are seeing high numbers of people where they're getting support or off at the moment, and where we're having to intervene. We'd like to do something with you. We'd like to look at how we can take what you are sort of, at the time we had a concept program, but not delivered it. So we sat down with them and we tested out on a small cohort the sort of program that we had designed, and that was very successful. So we moved that into the whole of their early careers cohort, and it was essentially built around a number of different sort of components that we think is necessary for success in this particular space. The first is creating the supportive culture. So is the workspace and the environment in which they're working conducive to good, positive mental health? Is it an environment where you can talk about your mental health? Is it an environment where people are able to share and be open and honest? So that involves work with typically line managers and more senior leaders to look at what they can do to create that culture and support. So we do that. And then we work specifically through either, well, it was historically was face-to-face workshops. So we have a 2-day workshop that's delivered by two of our sort of expert teams. So we've experts in clinical and positive psychology and in well-being who deliver our programs. So we work with the apprentices for over 2 days, looking at a whole range of different topics. And I think I'll just pop onto this one. So we cover off all of these topics. We spend a lot of time helping the apprentice understand themselves, what makes them tick, what drives them. And that's something that, you know, came from my own personal experiences, is if you don't understand how your body works and your mind works, you know, it's quite tough to then manage your mental health. So we spend a lot of time helping them understand what drives them, what motivates them, what makes them happy, and how can they manage their work and positive and personal life to maximize, if you like, their happiness and their well-being. And then we do some very practical stuff around stress awareness, stress management, which is all about, you know, essentially, you know, telling people that stress isn't a bad thing, because I think everyone looks at stress as a really bad thing. It's actually not. It's there to help us and support us, and if used in the right way, it can be a really positive tool in your career. It can make you far more effective in meetings and presentations, in situations where you need that adrenaline, you need to be alert. But what we do point out to people is if you stay in a stress state for too long, it can have negative physical and mental impacts. So we teach people about stress and how to think about stress, because it's actually how you think about stress the most dangerous thing. If you think about stress as a negative thing, you're far more likely to be ill than if you think about stress as a positive thing. And that's proven through research, and that was done in Harvard University. So we get people to rethink and reframe stress and think about it as their friend, but also understand that what some of the tipping points might be where they're perhaps seeing signs of stress coming through physically. And we go through all that. We look at personality is really important. Different types of personalities will respond to situations in different ways. So it's helpful for people to understand that. And we focus a lot on mindfulness. And that's really about helping people deal with pressure and stress in the here and now, and to manage their mind and manage how they think. I think being more mindful is been shown to really help people be more positive and live a happier life. And that comes within that package of mindfulness. We'd include practicing gratitude. So every day thinking about things that you're positive for, 3 good things, that is the sort of catchphrase a lot of people use. If you think about 3 good things every day, you can actually change your neural pathways to be more positive and to overcome some of that negative bias. So we teach them about practical skills to have more of a growth mindset and look at life more positively. So, and that's particularly important when they come up against barriers in the workplace or challenges. Quite often we'll see those as negative and a wall in front of us, whereas if you practice positivity and growth mindset, you're more likely to see a way around, over or under that barrier or problem that's facing you. So I've just touched on positive psychology and growth mindset, really, really important tools for helping stay well and perform in your work life. And then we spend a lot of time looking at resilience. So there's kind of 6 drivers of resilience that research shows are very important to people being able to bounce back. So we're all going to every day, every week, every month, we will all come up against things that knock us back, big things and little things. And resilience is really all about how you bounce back and how quickly you bounce back. And more resilient people bounce back quicker and come back quicker from adversity. But what we teach on our courses is, what are those things that make you a more resilient person? And some of them are really simple things like connections with nature, connections with other people, and we get them to think about, do they do enough of these things to make them a very resilient person? And then we do quite a bit on self-care, so that's more on physical well-being, so things like sleep, nutrition, all of which are intrinsically linked to mental health. If you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating well, it will impact negatively your mental health, and it will make you less resilient. You'll be able to deal, you will not be able to deal as well with life, if you like, if you're not looking after yourself physically. So we spend quite a bit of time helping the apprentices think about, are they getting enough sleep? What are some great things around, great ideas and tips around nutrition? Hydration's a massive one for young people. Not drinking enough water. The brain is 80% water, and is fired up by being really well hydrated. If we're not hydrated, and particularly in the morning, because overnight we dehydrate, so we don't rehydrate and power ourselves up in the morning, where our brains will not be as effective, as sharp, and again not as able to deal with challenges that we face. So we cover off loads of those. I'll come back to that if I may. So all of the sort of positive behaviours, we really focus on it being very practical. So it's about, what are the behaviours you can adopt every single day to help you be more resilient, deal with some of the challenges you face, and be happier. And fundamentally, we want people to be happier. And then at the bottom, we provide ongoing support. So we have online content which allows people to explore some of the topics we cover on the face-to-face in a bit more detail. So again, our sort of resident experts have recorded that content, and people can go and explore that. And then the specialist support we provide, we have a partnership with a company called Amoquo, which provides 24/7, it's effectively a 24/7 coaching app. So, and it's got over 1,000 scenarios built into it. So it's, and those scenarios relate to day-to-day challenges an apprentice will come across. So conflict, or workload, or bullying, or all the kind of things they might encounter in the workplace, and they're not sure how to deal with them. The app is a chatbot, so people can go on, say, this is the challenge I'm sort of facing, and it will give them advice on how to deal with it. But it does it from in a slightly different way to what you would normally expect from a coaching sort of scenario. It looks at how it develops the individual's emotional intelligence. So how can they deal with that person and with that situation in an emotionally intelligent way? What's the type of language they should be using? How should they respond to the challenge that they're facing? It might be something like upper delegation, or having to tell a boss you've got too much on and you don't know how to tell them. So what this app tries to do is help build the graduate or the apprentice's emotional intelligence. And at the back of this app, what we get for, and if I go back to this one, you can see on the right hand side, measure. This tells us, one, how emotional intelligence the apprentice workforce is, because it aggregates the data up and will give them a score. But it also will tell the employer what are the challenges the individuals are facing, what are the most common challenges that they're clicking on and going and looking at. And when you aggregate it up over 200 or 300 people, it actually gives the employer a really good feel for where they have a challenge or where they have an issue. So they might have workload come up a lot in a particular function or area of their business, where they need to then go and investigate with the local team. Is the apprentice got too much on? Is there something that we need to do to try and alleviate that? We also measure before and after. The key measures we put in place are, before the course, we ask people how equipped they feel for their career ahead in terms of their mental health and their resilience, and how equipped they feel to deal with stress in the workplace. So we ask a number of simple questions, and then we measure afterwards. Do they feel more equipped, more resilient, and better understanding and toolkit, if you like, to manage stress? And the great thing is, having run the programs now, we see quite a big shift from people feeling underprepared, low in confidence around all these different topics, and having gone through what we take them through, coming out the other side feeling more resilient, better equipped to face the future, and with a better sort of toolkit to handle sort of day-to-day stress that they will face. This is sort of our online toolkit that we've created. So Vicky's our clinical psychologist, Dr. Vicky Barnes. She was running this program that we have developed. She was running it across the Virgin Group, which Erica very kindly introduced me to Vicky. And she and George Anderson is our other sort of main delivery partner. I've created a whole suite of content which people can access after the course to go and explore topics a bit further, because in 2 days you can't really cover a lot of what we do. And I've just touched upon measurement, but you can see so before and after. We're pretty pleased with the results that we've seen. This is just one example. This is stress, but all the questions we asked, we saw this same shift down the page, if you like, which is good. People feeling that they had a strategy in place to deal with their mental health. Lessons we've learned along the way. Transitions are a high risk point. So moving into work is a high risk for mental health. Quite a number of the apprentices on our workshops have shared that they really struggle with that transition, moving away from perhaps home to a new environment, taking on a new job, working, losing some of that support network they maybe had at university or at school or at home. And quite often a lot of people have struggled with this and had mental health breakdowns or some form of mental illness. The strength of the support network is really interesting. What we discovered was a number, particularly in more IT engineering type roles, where apprentices are often quite introverted. Their support network was very, very low, because one of the exercises we do on our course is we ask people literally to, on a scale of 1 to 10, to stand along a wall, 1 being low and 10 being high, and we ask them, do they feel like they've got a strong support network? And very interestingly, I know it's kind of not very scientific, but often the engineers and the IT guys would be down the left hand. Young male IT in particular had quite low support networks, and that was in part because they were quite introverted and shy. So I remember one of the guys that we worked with actually saying, I just don't have any friends because I don't know how to make friends, and therefore I don't feel like I've got any support when I've got a problem. So that was a real eye opener for the employer about how can they foster a really strong support network amongst their apprentices and identify those people that might be at higher risk, because a support network is probably the number one thing for being more resilient and dealing with supporting your mental health. How do you create an open and honest dialogue? Another interesting thing came out of our workshops was very few of the people who disclosed on our workshops a mental health challenge had actually shared that with their employer. In fact, none of them had. So we probably had, of the 180 odd people we took through the course, we probably had 10 or 12 who'd had a significant major mental health issue. So some had full nervous breakdowns. Often not in the workplace, often before they joined the company, but not one of them had disclosed to the employer. And I think one of the real upsides for the employer was they were able to understand who perhaps needed a bit more support, who had challenges in the past, and maybe they need to keep a closer eye on those people to make sure their well-being was maintained. So I think one of the lessons or considerations we have with all the employers we work with is, how do you foster an environment where people feel they can share, even if it's been in the past, some of the challenges they faced. Our line managers are well prepared today. and how good is your information and insight and data on these sort of issues? Because we found it's been pretty poor with the employers we've worked with so far. They don't really understand and know how many people are facing challenges, or and have the insight at their fingertips, if you like. So I'm going to pause there, if that's all right, Erica. I've covered a lot of ground, and I'm not sure whether there's any questions or thoughts on that. I could probably go on for another half an hour, but I shan't.
I think it's fascinating, and I think I love the way that you've approached this apprentice support package in a different way to most perhaps employers would traditionally consider. I'm sure there's questions from the guys. I've definitely got some questions. So in terms of where we are at the moment, Mike, in terms of COVID, have you seen more requests for this, less requests from this? How's things like furloughing apprentices and that kind of stuff?
I should have touched on that, really. Yeah, we've had obviously all of our face-to-face work has completely evaporated, as you'd probably expect. But what we have had is requests to move our programs online and to bring them forward. So we had people lined up for programs in May, June, July who've actually asked us, say, look, can we do something more specific around COVID? Because people, particularly young people who are relatively new into organizations, not only are they being asked to work from home, they're being asked to continue their studies and are trying to do very, very difficult to do an apprenticeship when you're not in the workplace, when you're not alongside people who you can learn from and all the rest of it. You're very isolated. So we've had a number of employers very concerned about the well-being of their apprentices. So we've put together a series of 4 workshops where we've taken quite a bit of the content that we've talked about today, and we've brought it into a webinar format. So we do a particular program on making working from home work for you. So that's all about how do you adapt to working from home, how do you stay mentally well working from home, what are some of the things you should be thinking about. We do one on stress and stress management, because obviously it's quite a stressful time at the minute for everybody. Nobody's quite sure what's happening in the future. People are a bit worried about their jobs and about, so we work with them on a webinar looking at what are some of the ways you can manage stress in a positive way. And then we've done one on physical well-being. It's very easy at the moment to get into really, really bad habits. Easier to lie in or stay up late, not get enough sleep. Eating habits are going out the window. People are in that fridge all the time. Me for one. So we talk about why it's important to look after yourself physically, and we spend time with the apprentices giving them guidance on what that could look like and how they can manage that in the current COVID situation. And then we do one on resilience and mindfulness, and that's all about really helping people think about how they can be more resilient in a challenging situation. And we're doing probably one a day at the minute with different employers, and I think they're going down really, really well, because I think everyone's just worried about their apprentices and how they're coping with this, and it gives them because we're a third party. I think the apprentices are more willing to be open and honest about how they're feeling. So on the webinars, we do get a lot of sort of really open dialogue and honest feedback about how people are feeling. So we on the start of every webinar, we poll people on a scale of 1 to 10 on that mental health spectrum, and we ask them where they're sitting and why, and we do see a lot of people sitting at the top end. We also see a lot of people sitting at the bottom end and feeling pretty low and not great, and we have a really good conversation about that, and we think about ways that we can help people move back towards that sort of middle ground, or even into the top end of the spectrum.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting that you've got the move on to virtual, and then you've got the how do I generally feel about my apprenticeship, be either being furloughed or because of COVID anyway. So it's kind of multiple impacts, I suppose, isn't it, for the apprentice at the moment?
Totally. Yeah, it's been, I think most are coping pretty well. I think the working from home one we're getting less requests from that now, because I think people are getting used to the rhythm and cycle of working from home and have made the adjustments they need. I think now what we're starting to see is people moving, is more the mental health. 5 weeks in or 6 weeks in, I think you said it's a strange week this week. I think we're starting to see some of the actual initial excitement of doing something different for starting to wear off, and actually becoming quite challenging, being remote from loved ones or not being able to live your life the way you want to live your life. We're starting to see more of that coming through, and more requests for support around mental health. And I think for a while it's going to be like that. We need to wrap our arms around the young people and find ways to keep connected with them and help them through what will be a real challenging period. We also have, we've had companies ask us to do this, not just for their apprentices, but for their other employees, because everybody has mental health, and everybody, we're probably a bit more resilient because we've maybe had we've got a few more grey hairs, but and therefore learned resilience. But everybody's mental health is up and down in this period. So we are doing some work with organisations, where it's not with apprentices, and again, I think it's been useful.
Yeah, and I've just got a question in from Anne, which I think is very much linked to Mike, what you were just talking around supporting young people. So Anne's interested to know how well equipped are the mentors and line managers in regards to having these kind of conversations with apprentices, and how are they supported with this? I know you said on your framework earlier there was a section for line managers, but I think maybe Anne will be quite more interested to hear a bit more about that and what you're seeing in that space.
Yeah, line managers, we've run quite a number of line manager, and we're doing one this afternoon, webinars and face-to-face events, and typically they have a very low understanding of mental health. It's, we when we started doing our very first workshops, we thought they would come in at quite a high level of understanding, and the reality is they haven't. So when we're teaching them some of these concepts and going through some of the research and sharing some of the ideas, it's often a bit of a revelation to them. So I think there's definitely work to be done with line managers to help them understand what is good mental health, how do you support your team and your people, what does it take to create a really positive environment for people. And I think just maybe breaking down, because line managers are often from a slightly different generation to the apprentices themselves. Actually, apprentices are probably more open because they're more used to talking about mental health, young people these days, whereas the older generation is probably still quite stigmatized. And therefore, one of the things we work with line managers about is just how do you, and create an environment where you are comfortable to open up and have a conversation. So not just a typical line manager conversation about your performance review and your objectives and your goals, but actually about you and how you're feeling, and having conversations with people about their well-being. And I think it's been very, very positively received where we have run the events. And I think it gives the managers a lot more confidence that they can talk sensibly about mental health when they feel they understand their own mental health, but also when they understand some of the language and terminology that people use.
Yeah, it's a fear factor sometimes, isn't it, for some people. Just got another question from Christine. Would you say that the state of languishing is a little like complacency? That's a great question. Are we complacent with being in languishing?
I mean, languishing is, if somebody says, how are you feeling? You go, I'm okay. I mean, it is just that. We're okay. We're not unwell, but we're probably not absolutely on top of our game. And that is really what languishing is all about. And if you look at, and I've touched upon a lot of the reasons for that, we are negatively biased. So we are built to see the negative in life, and that's right for survival, but it doesn't help us to thrive and be happy. And therefore you have to train your brain to almost overcome that negativity bias. And be a happier person, and be a more positive person, have a more positive outlook. Now, some people, naturally in their DNA are more positive, and we're all wired very differently. So for each individual, it will be a very different story. But by and large, we as a race are negatively biased. So just things like simple practices like practicing positivity, gratitude has been shown to make people happier and move towards the right hand side. So that's why it's no coincidence that Scandinavian countries are happier people, because they practice it every day. And but it's not just about happiness, it's also about effectiveness. If you can have more of a growth mindset, you're more likely to see positive ways around a challenge when you're faced with it than if you have a negative bias and see everything as a blockage and a barrier. And we all know people who are like, the sappers in life who just see everything as negative and there's no way you can do that and it's not going to work. And in the workplace, that's equally as true. And that's because of how people are wired. If you look at growth versus fixed mindset, so fixed mindset typically is, the world is done to me. I don't have much control over what happens to me. Quite fatalistic. Versus a growth mindset, which is very much I'm in control. I'm in charge of this. I can, take my own destiny in my own hands. Actually, if you look at how we're genetically wired, it's about 50-50 in the population. 50% are fixed mindset, 50% are growth mindset. But you can move either way. So you can develop a growth mindset, and this is what we teach young people. So you can move from just being okay in the middle to actually shifting towards the right, having a more open mind, having a more positive mindset. So yeah, well, apologies, I've rambled on a bit on that answer, but for me, it's about recognizing there are things you can do day to day to shift.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Mike. I'm just aware of time. I know you've got a 10:30. I think most other people have got a 10:30 as well. So how can people get in touch with you if they're interested in learning more? And obviously I'll share the recording from today as well. But what's the best way for people to contact you if they're working with employers that have a need, etc.?
I would say just email me. It's mike@genhealthyminds.co.uk. Or we have a website, genhealthyminds.co.uk.
Yeah.
All of our webinars, programs, content is on there. Very happy to talk to anybody about what we do.
Yeah.
Support them whatever we can.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. No, thank you for spending some time with us. And we've had people come in and out as we've been talking, so we've had quite a fluid audience today. But hopefully that's been really helpful for everybody. Julie, Christine, etc. Yeah, got some nods, which is great. So thank you, Mike. Really appreciate your time, and I will share the recording on LinkedIn, etc. And I'll catch up with you really soon.
Lovely. Thanks, everybody.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.